Be honest with yourself for a second. There's a voice in your head, right? A quiet one that says, "I'm a loser," or a louder one that shouts, "I'm not good enough." It hits you when you miss a goal, when you feel stuck, or when you just don't feel like you're living up to your potential. That feeling, the one that makes you feel a little bit like a loser, I know it all too well. And I can tell you, with 1,000% certainty, you are not alone in that feeling. The truth is, that voice is a part of the human experience. It's a weight that most of us carry at some point in our lives. But here's the most important question. Why does it feel so hard to just change? To actually silence that voice and move forward? What if the reason we get so stuck isn't a lack of effort, but a lack of a clear philosophy? What if the key to changing our lives isn't in a new habit, but in a new way of seeing the world? In this video, we're going to explore 21 life philosophies from one of history's greatest minds, Miyamoto Musashi. But we're not just going to list rules. We're going to use them as a hidden technique, a kind of third eye vision, to help you face your problems with a calm mind. This isn't about becoming a samurai. It's about becoming unbreakable in your own life. Before we dive in, a quick heads up. Musashi's wisdom is so packed with powerful ideas, we couldn't fit it all into one video without rushing. So, to make sure you get the absolute most out of this, we've split it into 2 parts. Right now, we're going to tackle the first 11 philosophies, the foundational principles that lay the groundwork. And in part 2, we'll build on that foundation and explore the remaining chapters, taking your understanding to the next level. Hey, welcome to Dreamphilos, where we use philosophy, history, and many more complex topics in simpler ways to help you build a better life. If you're ready to see the world and yourself in a new light, then let's get started. Chapter 1. The Whispers You Fear to Hear. Musashi's hidden key to a soul, untouched by loneliness. Have you ever wondered what truly happens when the world falls silent around you? When the last sound fades, and there's nothing left but the quiet hum of your own breath and the gentle rhythm of your own heart. For many, this moment, this profound stillness, feels not like a refuge, but like a vast, unsettling emptiness. We fill our lives with constant noise, the chatter of conversations, the endless scroll of screens, the relentless pace of daily demands. Perhaps, just perhaps, because we are quietly, deeply afraid of what might surface in the silence. We fear the whispers of our own thoughts, the echoes of our unaddressed anxieties, the vast, echoing chamber of our own selves. But what if this fear, this avoidance, is precisely what holds us back from a profound, unshakable peace? What if the greatest connection we could ever forge isn't found in the bustling crowd, but in the quiet, sacred space within ourselves? This isn't just a philosophical musing. It's an ancient truth, a forbidden wisdom whispered through the ages by those who dared to truly listen, a wisdom embodied by a man named Musashi, whose solitude wasn't a void, but a forge for the soul. And what he discovered in that stillness is something we are desperately missing in our noisy, disconnected world today. Imagine, for a moment, the relentless clang of steel on steel, the shouts of men, the dust and blood of 100 duels. This was the early life of Miyamoto Musashi, a samurai unlike any other. He was a force of nature, a legend in his own time, undefeated in 60 duels before the age of 30. His name, a thunderclap across the battlefields of feudal Japan, brought shivers to seasoned warriors. He moved with a brutal, almost supernatural efficiency, his two swords a blur, his mind a steel trap. Yet beneath the veneer of invincibility, within the heart of this relentless warrior, there stirred a profound disquiet. Each victory, each felled opponent, left him feeling not triumphant, but increasingly hollow. The applause of the crowds, the fear in his enemies' eyes, the transient thrill of conquest, none of it filled the quiet, insistent ache that grew within him. He was surrounded by life, by conflict, by the raw energy of existence. Yet he felt a deepening sense of separation. He realized with a chilling clarity that these external battles, while defining his legend, were doing nothing to shape his soul. He was a master of the sword, yes, but a novice in the art of living. So Musashi did something radical, something almost unthinkable for a man of his stature and reputation. He walked away from the clamor. He turned his back on the superficial adulation, the endless challenges, the very fabric of the world that had defined him. He sought not more battles, but less. He sought not more noise, but profound quiet. His path led him away from the bustling cities, away from the echoing dojos, and into the raw, untamed heart of nature. He became a wanderer, a hermit by choice, his only companions the wind in the pines, the rush of the river, and the vast, unblinking sky above him. This wasn't a retreat born of defeat or despair, but a strategic withdrawal, a deliberate act of profound introspection. He understood that to truly master himself, he first needed to quiet the cacophony of the world, and within that silence, confront the even greater noise that resided within his own mind. He knew, intuitively, that true strength wasn't about defeating others, but about conquering the chaotic internal landscape that threatened to consume him. One of his most profound choices, the one that truly encapsulates the essence of his unique solitude, was his retreat to the Reigando cave in his final years. Imagine, for a moment, this ancient, damp cavern carved into the side of Mount Kinpu. No grand halls, no ornate trappings, just the rough, unyielding stone walls, the drip of water, and the distant sounds of nature. It was here, in this stark, elemental setting, that Musashi truly embraced the art of walking alone. This was not a loneliness forced upon him by circumstance, but a deliberate, conscious choice to cultivate a space where he could fully engage with his innermost being. He wasn't avoiding human connection. He was seeking a deeper, more authentic connection to himself, a connection that he believed was impossible amidst the distractions of society. He spent his days in meditation, in quiet reflection, in the meticulous crafting of his final masterpiece, the Book of Five Rings, and perhaps even more importantly, in the simple, profound act of just being. What did Musashi discover in this radical quietude? He found that solitude, when embraced with intention, is not the same as loneliness. Loneliness is an ache, a yearning for something external to fill an internal void. It is a state of being disconnected. Musashi's solitude, however, was a profound state of connection, a connection to his own essence, to the raw, unfiltered truth of existence, and to the subtle currents of the universe. It was a wellspring, not an abyss. He learned that the quiet hearth of one's own soul, when tended with care and intention, can cast a warmth that dispels all shadows, even the shadows of isolation. He allowed the superficial layers of his identity, the warrior, the duelist, the legend, to fall away, revealing the core of who he was. In the silence, the whispers he once feared became gentle guides, revealing profound insights about life, death, and the true meaning of mastery. He learned to differentiate between the transient desires of the ego and the enduring wisdom of the spirit. The cave became his sanctuary, but also his crucible. In that profound stillness, there was no escaping himself. The anxieties he'd once drowned out with the clash of swords and the roar of crowds now echoed clearly. Doubts, fears, regrets, they all surfaced. But instead of running from them, he faced them. He learned to observe them without judgment, to understand their origins, and finally, to let them dissipate like morning mist. This was the true battle, far more challenging and infinitely more rewarding than any duel he had ever fought. From this internal wrestling, from this deep listening to his own soul, emerged the Dokodo, or the way of walking alone. These weren't rigid commandments, but distilled truths, principles for living a life of profound internal freedom. Rules like, accept everything just the way it is, do not seek pleasure for its own sake, and do not fear death, were not born from a detached philosophy, but from the raw, lived experience of someone who had faced himself in the silence and found an unshakable core. They were the armor he forged for his soul, not against others, but against the internal chaos that could truly diminish him. Now let's gently turn our gaze from Musashi's ancient cave to our modern world. Think about your day, right now. How many moments of true, unadulterated silence do you experience? How often do you simply be, without the pull of a screen, the hum of a device, the urgency of a task? We live in an era of constant stimulation, a relentless barrage of information, notifications, and demands on our attention. We are more connected than ever, yet paradoxically, many of us feel more profoundly lonely, more disconnected from ourselves. We crave external validation, social media likes, the constant buzz of communication, because the thought of being truly alone with ourselves, with the whispers we fear to hear, feels too overwhelming. We are missing out on the profound lessons Musashi learned. We're lacking the very emotional armor he forged in his solitude. Consider the cost of this constant outward focus. Without moments of intentional quiet, without the practice of befriending our own inner landscape, we become easily swayed by external forces. Our emotions are dictated by the latest news cycle, the opinions of others, the transient highs and lows of daily life. We become like a boat without an anchor, tossed by every passing wave. We miss the opportunity to cultivate deep self-awareness, to understand our true desires, to listen to the quiet intuition that guides us towards our authentic path. This isn't just a loss of philosophical insight, it's an emotional threat. We risk feeling perpetually unmoored, constantly seeking external solutions to internal longings, never quite finding the peace we crave, because we're looking in all the wrong places. We neglect the quiet hearth of our own soul, and in doing so, we become vulnerable to the storms of life. But imagine the profound peace, the quiet strength, the unshakable resilience you could gain by simply carving out moments of intentional solitude. It doesn't mean retreating to a cave or becoming a hermit. It means choosing, even for a few minutes each day, to turn off the noise, to sit in stillness, to take a walk in nature without your phone, to simply breathe and observe the quiet unfolding of your own thoughts. It means consciously creating a space where the whispers can emerge, not as threats, but as gentle guides. What emotional rewards await you? A deeper understanding of yourself, a clearer sense of purpose, a stronger emotional center that can withstand the inevitable stresses of life. You'll find that true creativity often sparks in the quiet, that genuine compassion for others, often flows from a wellspring of self-acceptance, and that profound connection with the world around you can only truly blossom when you are first connected to the quiet heart within. This is not about being antisocial or withdrawing from life. It is about equipping yourself to engage with life from a place of strength, clarity, and inner peace. It's about building your own quiet hearth, a sanctuary within you that remains warm and luminous, even amidst the fiercest storms. When you truly know yourself, when you have befriended your own silence, you cease to chase external validation and begin to radiate an inner calm that naturally draws genuine connection. You discover that being truly alone is not about being lonely, but about being whole. So, as you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the quiet spaces in your life. Do you embrace them, or do you fill them? What whispers might be waiting for you in the stillness? Whispers not of fear, but of profound wisdom and unshakable peace. Perhaps, just perhaps, the most powerful journey you can ever embark on is the journey inward, towards the quiet hearth of your own soul. Chapter 2. The Unseen Scar. Why Musashi Found His Edge. Not in flawlessness, but in the quiet acceptance of what's broken. What if everything you've ever been told about strength is a lie? What if the relentless pursuit of perfection, the desperate need to hide every crack and flaw, is actually holding you back from a power far more profound, far more resilient than you can possibly imagine? We're taught to chase flawlessness, to present an unblemished facade to the world, believing that only then will we truly be enough. But what if the greatest warrior of all time, a man whose very name became synonymous with invincible skill, found his ultimate edge not in the absence of imperfection, but in its quiet, radical embrace? There's a secret whispered through the centuries, carried on the winds from ancient Japan, a truth revealed by Miyamoto Musashi that can utterly transform how you see your own perceived weaknesses. This isn't just history. It's a direct challenge to the anxieties that keep so many of us striving and falling short. A gentle invitation to discover an unshakable peace that only blossoms when you finally stop fighting what's broken within you. And what happens if you ignore this? You might just continue to chip away at your own true strength, forever chasing a phantom perfection, while the real enduring power lies quietly, patiently waiting in the very places you've tried to mend. Imagine a world not so different from our own, yet veiled in the mists of time, where the clatter of steel was the harsh poetry of survival, and a man's worth was often measured by the sharpness of his blade and the unflinching resolve in his eyes. This was the world of Miyamoto Musashi, a name whispered with awe and trepidation across feudal Japan. But before he became the legendary Kensei, the Sword Saint, he was just a young man, driven by an almost manic intensity, constantly pushing himself against the unforgiving anvil of combat. He was a force of nature, yes, but beneath the raw power, there was a relentless internal pressure, a silent insistence on flawlessness. Every misstep, every moment of hesitation, every perceived weakness gnawed at him, fueling a desperate quest for an unattainable ideal. He sought perfection in his technique, in his mind, in his very being, believing it was the only path to true mastery, the only way to silence the gnawing doubts that even the most formidable warriors carry. He would spend countless hours beneath the harsh sun, his bakken, a wooden practice sword, becoming an extension of his will. His movements were precise, powerful, a whirlwind of calculated aggression. But even as his body honed itself to an exquisite sharpness, His mind was often a battlefield of its own. He would replay duels, analyzing every fraction of a second, dissecting every micro-movement, searching for the elusive fault lines. If his stance was off by a hair, if his breath hitched for an instant, if a flicker of doubt crossed his mind, he perceived it as a profound failure. This relentless self-critique, while driving him to incredible heights, also cast a long shadow, a subtle, almost imperceptible tension that clung to his very essence. He was strong, undeniably so, but there was a brittle quality to that strength, a rigid insistence on an unblemished surface. Think of a magnificent porcelain vase, crafted with exquisite care, its surface gleaming, reflecting the light in a flawless sheen. It is beautiful, yes, but also fragile. One sharp blow, one unexpected fall, and its perfection scatters into 1,000 irreparable fragments. Musashi, in his early days, was striving to be that vase, utterly perfect, but inherently vulnerable to the first true crack. His life, however, was not one of pristine dojos and polite sparring. It was a life forged in the crucible of real combat, where the stakes were not points, but life and death. And in the brutal honesty of battle, perfection often gives way to raw, messy reality. There came a time, after countless duels, after walking away from so many encounters where death had brushed against his sleeve, that a subtle shift began within him. It wasn't a dramatic epiphany, but a slow, quiet unraveling of his rigid beliefs. He had faced opponents who were strong, cunning, and sometimes even more technically skilled than he was. Yet, he had survived. He had prevailed. And he began to notice something profound. It wasn't always his flawless technique that saved him. Sometimes it was an instinctual parry born of desperation, a sudden unconventional movement, a moment of profound adaptability that emerged when his carefully constructed perfection threatened to crumble. He began to observe the world around him with new eyes. He saw the gnarled, ancient tree, its trunk scarred by lightning, its branches twisted by years of wind and storm, yet still standing, deeper rooted, more resilient than the young, straight saplings. He saw the potter, skillfully mending a cracked bowl, filling the fissures with gold lacquer, transforming the imperfection into something more beautiful, more unique than its original pristine state. This was kintsugi, the art of golden repair, a philosophy born from the understanding that breakage and repair are part of the history of an object, not something to disguise. And slowly, gently, this understanding began to seep into Musashi's very bones. He realized that his relentless pursuit of flawlessness was, in itself, a kind of weakness. It consumed energy, created internal resistance, and ironically made him less adaptable. When he made a mistake, even a minor one, the internal critic would lash out, creating a ripple of self-doubt that could distract him, even for a split second. And in battle, a split second was the difference between life and death. He began to understand that true strength wasn't about the absence of cracks, but about the ability to flow around them, to integrate them, to even find new pathways because of them. Consider a river, winding its way through a landscape. It encounters a massive boulder, an undeniable obstacle. Does the river rage against it, attempting to shatter it? No. The river flows around it, finding the path of least resistance, carving new channels, perhaps even creating a beautiful eddy where life can flourish. The river doesn't see the boulder as a flaw in its journey. It sees it as a part of the landscape, and in navigating it, the river becomes more complex, more dynamic, more truly itself. Musashi began to apply this understanding to his own being. He stopped fighting his perceived imperfections. He stopped striving for an ideal that was, in truth, an illusion. Instead, he began to acknowledge the moments of hesitation, the flicker of fear, the occasional misstep, not as failures to be eradicated, but as simply what was. And in that quiet acceptance, something remarkable happened. The internal tension began to dissipate. The rigid insistence on perfection softened into a fluid adaptability. His mind, no longer consumed by self-criticism, became clearer, more present, more acutely aware of the nuances of the moment. His stances, while still powerful, gained a newfound fluidity. His strikes, while still devastating, carried a subtle grace, an almost effortless quality that only comes from profound inner peace. He was no longer trying to be perfect. He was simply being. And in that state of authentic being, his true, formidable strength, the strength that embraced the entirety of himself, the skilled warrior and the vulnerable human, began to truly manifest. This wasn't about becoming sloppy or abandoning discipline. Far from it. It was about recognizing that discipline, when rooted in self-acceptance rather than self-condemnation, becomes a far more potent force. He understood that sometimes the most effective move in a duel wasn't the textbook perfect one, but the slightly awkward, unconventional one that capitalized on an opponent's expectation of perfection. He learned that the very cracks in his mental armor, the moments of doubt, the glimpses of fear, could be acknowledged, understood, and then used as signals, as sources of information, rather than weaknesses to be suppressed. What does this ancient wisdom mean for us here in our modern lives? We live in a world that constantly bombards us with images of flawlessness. Social media parades curated lives, advertising peddles impossible ideals, and the pressure to present a perfect facade can be overwhelming. We chase external validation, believing that if we just eliminate every perceived flaw, we will finally be accepted, finally be worthy. But like Musashi's early quest, this relentless pursuit often leaves us feeling more exhausted, more anxious, and ultimately, less authentic. Imagine applying Musashi's quiet revelation to your own life. What if that perceived flaw in your personality, that quirk you try to hide, is actually a unique strength, a part of your authentic self that, when embraced, allows you to connect with others on a deeper, more genuine level? What if the mistakes you've made, the failures you've experienced, aren't evidence of your unworthiness, but rather the very scars that tell the story of your resilience, your growth, your journey? These are your kintsugi lines, waiting to be illuminated, to be seen not as blemishes, but as profound marks of experience and survival. When we cling to the illusion of perfection, we become brittle. We become afraid to try, afraid to fail, afraid to be seen as anything less than ideal. We shut ourselves off from genuine connection, from the messy, beautiful reality of human experience. But when we allow ourselves to acknowledge our imperfections, to accept our vulnerabilities, we tap into a different kind of power. It's a softer power, perhaps, but one that is infinitely more durable, more adaptable, and ultimately more truly human. Consider the emotional armor we miss without this lesson. We walk through life constantly braced, constantly guarding against exposure, against the possibility of being seen as less than. This creates a subtle but persistent anxiety, a feeling of always being on, always performing. But what peace could we gain if we shed that heavy armor? What profound sense of liberation could we experience if we truly understood that our value, our worth, is not contingent upon our flawlessness, but inherent in our unique, imperfect selves. Musashi learned that the strongest blade wasn't the one forged without a single impurity, but the one that had been tempered by fire and hammered into shape, its very molecular structure strengthened by the intense pressure it had endured. The cracks in the cup, when acknowledged and embraced, allow it to hold more tea, not less. They create new pathways, new textures, new depths that were absent in its pristine state. So, as you drift towards sleep tonight, let this thought settle gently within you. You are not diminished by your imperfections. You are not broken by your struggles. In fact, within those very perceived flaws lies a quiet, profound power. The strength that truly endures, the peace that truly calms, comes not from erasing your cracks, but from the courageous, gentle act of acknowledging them, accepting them, and understanding that they are, in their own unique way, what allows you to hold more of life, more of yourself, more of everything that truly matters. This ancient wisdom isn't just a relic of the past. It's a timeless invitation to find your own unshakable strength, not in spite of your humanity, but because of it. And when you wake tomorrow, perhaps you'll find a subtle shift within, a quiet sense of liberation, a knowing that the most beautiful strength often blossoms from the most unexpected places. Chapter 3. When the world screamed, he listened to the snowflake fall. Have you ever felt the crushing weight of noise? Not just the clamor of a city street, but the relentless roar of expectation, the insistent buzz of demands, the deafening screams of a world convinced it knows best. It's easy to get swept away, to lose your own voice amidst the cacophony, to believe that to survive, you must shout even louder. But what if the profound secret to true strength, to unwavering clarity, lies not in joining the chorus of chaos, but in cultivating an almost impossible stillness within it? What if, when the world outside becomes a deafening shriek, the most powerful act is to listen, truly listen, to something as ephemeral and silent as a single snowflake falling? This isn't just a poetic notion. It's a deeply practical, profoundly transformative path walked by the legendary Miyamoto Musashi. He didn't just survive an age of unbridled violence. He mastered it, not by outshouting his opponents, but by hearing the subtlest whisper, perceiving the unseen tremor. What emotional calm are we forfeiting? What decisive insights are we missing if we never learn to tune out the world's scream and truly listen to the snowflake fall? Imagine the feudal landscape of Japan, a land perpetually at war with itself. The air wasn't merely filled with the sounds of daily life. It vibrated with the tension of impending conflict, the cries of the wounded, the clash of steel, the frantic whispers of fear and ambition. For a warrior like Musashi, every breath was potentially his last, every encounter a dance with death. In this relentless arena of survival, where quick reflexes and brute force were often the celebrated virtues, Musashi carved a different path, one that mystified his rivals and secured his legend. He wasn't just a master swordsman. He was a master of perception, a virtuoso of stillness in motion. Think of his early duels. They were often chaotic, brutal affairs. Young Musashi, fueled by fiery ambition and raw talent, would rush in, his movements a blur of aggression. He relied on speed, power, and an almost reckless courage. And he won, yes, but often by overwhelming his opponent with sheer force, by drowning out their skill with his own ferocious energy. There was a tempest within him, mirroring the tempest without. He was effective, but he was also constantly expending immense energy, reacting to every external stimulus with equal intensity. But as his reputation grew, so did the stakes. His opponents became more formidable, more cunning. They were no longer easily overwhelmed. He found himself facing masters who possessed not just physical skill, but a terrifying inner quiet, a presence that seemed to absorb his attacks rather than deflect them. In these encounters, his usual tactics began to falter. The roar of his own internal battle, the desperate need to dominate, sometimes obscured the subtle cues that could mean the difference between victory and defeat. He was fighting the world's scream with his own scream, and sometimes the combined noise was just too much. It was during these profound challenges, perhaps after a particularly grueling duel where he narrowly escaped, that Musashi began to realize the limitations of brute force and external aggression alone. He started to look inward, to the vast, untapped reservoir of his own mind and senses. He sought not to amplify the external noise, but to diminish its influence over him. He started practicing a different kind of combat, one waged in the silence between heartbeats. He would spend hours in meditation, not in a temple, but in the wild, under the open sky, amidst the sounds of nature. He didn't seek to block out the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, or the distant call of a bird. Instead, he sought to listen to them, truly listen, without judgment, without analysis, allowing them to simply be. And through this deep listening, he began to perceive the underlying stillness, the quiet hum beneath all sounds. He learned to distinguish the individual notes in the grand symphony of existence, rather than just hearing a chaotic wall of sound. This practice began to translate directly to his training and his duels. He started moving with a newfound economy of motion, his awareness expanding beyond his immediate opponent. He wasn't just watching their blade. He was feeling the shift in their weight, hearing the subtle change in their breathing, sensing the ripple of their intent before it fully formed. He wasn't reacting to their attack. He was perceiving its genesis, its nascent form, and then moving to neutralize it with minimal effort. It was like he was listening to the very silence that preceded their strike. Consider a fierce winter storm. Winds howling, snow swirling in a blinding vortex. Most people would try to fight against it, to push through the resistance. But Musashi began to cultivate the ability to find the stillness within that storm, to perceive the individual snowflakes dancing, to feel the subtle shift in the wind's direction before it fully changed course. He trained his mind to find the calm eye of the hurricane, not by escaping it, but by inhabiting it. This wasn't about being passive or slow. On the contrary, it was about achieving a state of hyper-awareness, a heightened perception that allowed for instantaneous, precise action. When your mind isn't cluttered by internal chatter, when you're not constantly reacting to external noise, you free up immense mental and physical energy. You become like a clear, still pond that perfectly reflects the sky and senses the slightest ripple on its surface. He famously emphasized the concept of mushin, no mind or empty mind, a state where the mind is free from thoughts, emotions, and attachments, allowing for spontaneous and fluid action. This wasn't a void, but a mind utterly present, utterly receptive. It's like a perfectly tuned instrument, ready to resonate with the slightest touch, rather than a cacophony of jumbled notes. When the world screamed, his mind became still, listening not to the shouts, but to the whispers, to the very intention behind the scream. He could perceive the snowflake falling, even in the loudest tempest. What does this ancient discipline of stillness mean for us in our modern, overwhelmingly noisy lives? We are constantly bombarded. Notifications ping, social media scrolls relentlessly, news cycles rage, opinions clash, and deadlines loom. Our minds become cluttered, our attention fragmented. We often feel overwhelmed, anxious, and perpetually behind, simply because we're trying to process an impossible amount of information and noise. We're trying to shout louder than the world, or at least keep pace with its relentless clamor. Imagine the emotional calm you could gain if you cultivated this Musashi-like ability to listen to the snowflake fall amidst the world's scream. Think of the clarity that could emerge. When you're making a crucial decision, are you listening to the quiet intuition within you? Or are you being swayed by the loudest voices in the room, the most urgent demands, the prevailing opinions that may not serve your true path? When faced with conflict, do you react to the anger and aggression thrown at you? Or can you find the underlying stillness, perceive the subtle openings, and respond with thoughtful precision? Without this ability, we're perpetually on the defensive, reacting rather than responding. We exhaust ourselves by fighting every wave, rather than learning to ride them. We lose touch with our own inner compass, drowned out by the external GPS. The emotional thread is clear. A life lived in constant reaction to external noise is a life of perpetual anxiety, clouded judgment, and ultimately a disconnection from our authentic selves. We become automatons, driven by external forces rather than conscious beings charting our own course. But the reward? The profound peace of mind that comes from knowing you can find your center, your quiet observation post, no matter how chaotic the external storm. The sharp insight that emerges when you can filter out the irrelevant noise and focus on the essential truths. The unshakable confidence that grows when you trust your own ability to perceive the subtle, the unseen, the quiet signals that others miss. This is the difference between surviving and truly thriving, between merely existing and truly mastering your own experience. Musashi didn't escape the screaming world. He learned to navigate it with an almost supernatural grace by developing an internal sanctuary of stillness. He understood that true power wasn't about dominating the external, but about mastering the internal. So, as the world continues its relentless clamor, consider this quiet wisdom. What would it feel like to pause, just for a moment, and try to listen to the snowflake fall, to filter out the noise, to quiet the internal chatter, and to simply be present with the most subtle sensations, the most delicate whispers of intuition? Perhaps then, you too will begin to see the hidden patterns, understand the unspoken truths, and move through your own challenges with an effortless clarity that others can only marvel at. And when you wake tomorrow, perhaps you'll find that the world hasn't stopped screaming, but you finally learned how to hear something far more important within its roar. Chapter 4. Why the Cracked Cup Holds More Tea. Musashi's embrace of imperfect strength. Picture a master swordsmith. He pours molten steel, folds it again and again, beats it with relentless precision, seeking perfection. The ideal blade, flawless, mirror bright, unbreakable. Musashi trained like that smith, relentless, demanding. Yet, the core of his unshakable mind wasn't forged in the fantasy of perfection, but in the profound acceptance of the crack, the flaw, the beautiful necessary imperfection. He learned that the cup that tries to be perfectly solid shatters under the first real blow, while the cup that knows it has a crack learns how to hold the tea without spilling a drop. That shift, that embrace of the imperfect self, it's where true resilience takes root. Doesn't that sound like a gentler kind of strength? Let me pour you the story. We often imagine the legendary warrior as a statue, immovable, flawless, immune to doubt. Musashi himself wrote of striving for mastery, for the way. It sounds like a quest for perfection, doesn't it? The flawless technique, the unblemished victory. But delve deeper into his life, into the Niiten Ichi-ryu strategy he created, and a different truth emerges. Think of the young Musashi, perhaps after a duel won through sheer aggression, maybe even perceived as dishonorable by some. He wasn't born the serene sage. He was fiery, impulsive, sometimes brutal. He made mistakes. He lost his temper. He felt fear. He wasn't perfect. And crucially, he knew it. He didn't hide these flaws behind bravado or deny them. He studied them. That moment of fear before a duel? He didn't try to crush it out of existence like a weakness. He observed it. Where did it tighten in his chest? How did it make his breath quicken? He learned its contours, its triggers. He didn't love the fear, but he stopped seeing it as an enemy to be annihilated. He saw it as information, a part of the landscape of his being, like a crack in a teacup. Trying to pretend the crack isn't there, or smashing the cup in frustration because it isn't perfect, only leads to broken shards and spilled tea. But accepting the crack, that changes everything. You learn how to hold the cup so the crack doesn't leak. You learn its unique shape. You understand its limits. You appreciate the cup because of its history, its lived experience, its imperfection. Musashi applied this to his entire being. His famous strategy often involved using two swords, the long katana and the shorter wakizashi, a style born not just from efficiency, but perhaps from an understanding that one tool, one approach, one perfect answer doesn't fit every situation. Sometimes you need the reach, sometimes the closed defense. Flexibility was key. He advocated adopting the stance that suits you best, not forcing oneself into an idealized, unnatural posture. He understood that rigidity breaks, flexibility endures. His mental unbreakability wasn't about having no weaknesses. It was about knowing his weaknesses so intimately, so compassionately, that they couldn't be used against him. He integrated them. He made them part of his strategy. The crack wasn't a failure, it was a feature. Think of a willow branch bending under heavy snow. It doesn't fight the weight with rigid pride. It yields. It adapts. It lets the snow slide off. And when the sun returns, it springs back, whole. The mighty oak, proud and unyielding, might snap under the same load. Musashi became the willow. He learned to bend without breaking. He embraced the reality of his human limitations, the fatigue, the doubt, the anger, not as fatal flaws, but as aspects of his strength to be managed, understood, and incorporated. His way wasn't about becoming a flawless godsword, but about becoming a perfectly human instrument, aware of every nuance, every quirk, every beautiful, resilient crack. So, when you look at your own perceived flaws, the anxieties, the hesitations, the moments of weakness, remember Musashi's cracked cup. Don't rage against the imperfection. Study it. Know it. Hold yourself with that gentle awareness. Learn how you best hold the tea of life, even with your unique cracks. That acceptance, that deep self-knowledge without judgment, that's where unbreakable calm truly begins. Feel the gentle strength in accepting yourself, just as you are, cracks and all. A soft sigh of relief. And within that acceptance of his own inner landscape, Musashi cultivated an almost supernatural awareness. While others were deafened by the roar of conflict, he learned to hear the whisper of a single snowflake landing. How does one find such profound stillness amidst the chaos? Let's step into that silent space. Chapter 5. The still point of the spinning world. Musashi's anchor in the ever-changing tides tonight. As the world outside begins to hush its busy whispers, and the moon casts its gentle glow, let's drift back to a time long ago, to a land where ancient trees stood witness to quiet wisdom. Imagine a warrior, not just of strength, but of an extraordinary stillness. A man named Musashi, whose life was a swirling current of challenges, duels, and restless journeys. Yet within him he found a profound calm, a still point, even when everything around him spun in a blur. Have you ever wondered how, amidst life's constant ebb and flow, one might discover such an unshakable anchor? Tonight we'll explore just that, a secret he held close, one that can softly settle our own racing thoughts. Close your eyes, or simply let your gaze soften, as we journey to a world where a warrior's spirit was forged not just in battle, but in the quiet contemplation of nature, in the profound understanding of change itself. Musashi, in his solitary wanderings, often observed the rivers. He saw how they flowed ceaselessly, sometimes a gentle murmur, sometimes a roaring torrent. Yet the riverbed, the deep current beneath the surface, remained constant. This observation, so simple, yet so profound, began to shape his understanding of what it meant to be truly steadfast. He learned that the world is a stage of constant motion. Seasons turn, fortunes rise and fall, people come and go, and our own feelings, like passing clouds, shift with the wind. To resist this change is to fight the very nature of existence, a battle no one can win. Instead, Musashi sought not to halt the tides, but to find his own unwavering anchor within them. He understood that true resilience wasn't about being rigid, but about being like the river itself, adaptable on the surface, yet deeply rooted in its essence. Consider a mighty oak tree standing tall through generations of storms. Its branches might sway and bend, leaves might be torn away by gales, but its roots, deep and wide, hold it firm. Musashi learned to cultivate these invisible roots within himself. How did he do this? By cultivating a singular focus, by eliminating distractions, by stripping away the superfluous. He spent years honing his craft, not just with the sword, but with his mind. He practiced the art of presence, of being fully in the moment, whether he was facing an opponent, sketching a landscape, or simply walking a quiet path. This wasn't about ignoring the world. It was about engaging with it so completely that external chaos couldn't penetrate his inner sanctuary. When a challenge arose, he didn't panic. He observed. He adapted. He acted from a place of clarity, unburdened by fear or hesitation. It was as if he could slow time down, not physically but within his own perception, allowing him to see the patterns in the chaos, to find the still point that offered him an advantage. Imagine a clear pool of water on a windless day, reflecting the sky perfectly. If a stone is tossed in, ripples spread, disturbing the reflection. But eventually, the ripples fade, and the stillness returns. Musashi aimed for this mental clarity. He knew that anger, fear, doubt, these were the stones that disturbed the mind's tranquil surface. He didn't suppress these emotions. He acknowledged them, understood their fleeting nature, and then let them pass. This wasn't easy. It required constant self-awareness, a gentle yet firm discipline. He meditated, not in a formal sense perhaps, but through the rigorous practice of his art, through the mindful act of everyday living. Each brushstroke, each step, each breath became an opportunity to return to that inner quiet. He understood that our minds, when left untended, can become noisy places, filled with endless chatter, worries about the past, anxieties about the future. But by consciously returning to the present, by focusing on the task at hand, we can quiet that internal storm. Musashi also found his still point in detachment. This doesn't mean indifference or a lack of care. Rather, it's about releasing the need for specific outcomes, freeing himself from the grip of expectations. When he entered a duel, he wasn't attached to winning or losing, but to performing his absolute best, to being fully present and responsive. This, paradoxically, increased his chances of success. When we cling too tightly to results, we become rigid, unable to adapt. But when we release that grip, when we trust in our preparation and intuition, we become fluid, capable of responding to whatever life throws our way. It's like holding a handful of sand too tightly. It slips through your fingers, but if you hold it gently, openly, it stays. This gentle detachment allowed him to see situations with clarity, unclouded by emotional turmoil. He understood that clinging to what was, or what he wished would be, was a source of suffering. Embracing the present in all its uncertainty was the path to peace. His understanding of the still point was deeply intertwined with the concept of emptiness, or mu. Not an empty void, but a mind free from preconceptions, biases, and ego. A mind open and receptive, like an empty vessel, ready to be filled. When his mind was empty in this sense, it was fully present, acutely aware of its surroundings without the interference of internal noise. This allowed him to perceive subtle cues, to anticipate movements, to react instantaneously without conscious thought. It was a state of effortless action, a flow state where his body and mind acted as one. We too can strive for this mental clarity by regularly decluttering our minds, by letting go of old grudges, limiting beliefs, and unnecessary worries. We create space for new insights, for creativity, for a deeper connection with ourselves and the world around us. It's like clearing out an old attic. Suddenly, there's room to breathe, to create, to simply be. Imagine, too, the power of simplicity. Musashi, in his later years, lived a life stripped of excess. He didn't pursue wealth or fame. His focus was on his art, on his understanding of strategy, and on living authentically. This simplicity, far from being a limitation, was a source of profound strength. When we simplify our lives, we reduce the external demands on our attention, freeing up mental energy. We can then direct that energy toward what truly matters, cultivating our inner peace, connecting with loved ones, pursuing our passions. It's like a garden. When you remove the weeds, the flowers have more room to bloom. Musashi understood that true richness wasn't found in accumulating possessions, but in cultivating inner freedom. His journeys, though often fraught with danger, were also periods of deep introspection. He sought out solitude, not as an escape from the world, but as an opportunity to listen to the whispers of his own spirit, to understand the rhythms of nature, to observe the world without the filter of human society. In these quiet moments, he found his still point, the unchanging core of his being. He learned to trust his intuition, to listen to that inner voice that guides us when we quiet the external clamor. We too can find these moments of solitude, even in our busy lives. A quiet walk, a few moments of silent reflection before bed, a peaceful cup of tea. These small acts can help us reconnect with our own inner wisdom, with the still point that resides within each of us. So as the night deepens, let this thought settle gently in your mind. The world will always spin, changes will always come. But like Musashi, we can cultivate our own still point, our own anchor within ourselves. It's a journey of quiet observation, of gentle detachment, of embracing simplicity, and of returning again and again to the present moment. And in that stillness, we can find a profound strength, an unshakable calm that allows us to navigate any tide, any storm, with grace and peace. May your dreams tonight be as calm and clear as a still pond, reflecting the quiet wisdom of the world. Chapter 6. The unseen current of his river. Musashi's flow in the face of resistance tonight. Let's drift into a world where challenges aren't brick walls, but rather flowing rivers. And the wisest path isn't to fight the current, but to understand its unseen pull. Imagine a warrior, not of brute force, but of subtle movement, whose strength lay in his adaptability, much like water itself. As you settle in, let your own worries begin to soften, like stones smoothed by a gentle, persistent stream. There's a profound peace in learning to flow, even when the world seems to push against you. And so, we turn our thoughts to Musashi, not just the legendary swordsman, but the philosopher of movement, the quiet observer of nature's relentless dance. He understood a truth that often eludes us in our busy lives, that true strength isn't always about imposing your will, but about aligning with the deeper currents of existence. Think of a mighty river, carving canyons over millennia, not through violent explosions, but through an unwavering, consistent flow. It bends, it weaves, it narrows, it widens, always finding the path of least resistance. Yet in its persistence, it overcomes every obstacle. This was the essence of Musashi's mental unbreakability when facing the world's myriad resistances. He didn't just meet opposition, he flowed around it, through it, and sometimes he simply became it. Imagine him on a dusty road, perhaps a little weary from travel, encountering a sudden, unexpected challenge. A group of bandits, a misstep on uneven terrain, a moment of doubt creeping into his thoughts. For many, these would be moments of abrupt halt, of rigid reaction. But Musashi, in his wisdom, saw them differently. He saw the situation as a new configuration of the riverbed, and his task was simply to adjust his own flow. He often spoke of being like water, formless, shapeless, yet capable of eroding the hardest stone. This wasn't merely a poetic ideal, it was a practical philosophy, woven into the very fabric of his being. Consider his countless duels. Each opponent presented a unique resistance, a different current. Some were aggressive, like a raging torrent, others subtle, like an unseen eddy. Had Musashi rigidly adhered to one fixed technique, he would have been swept away. Instead, he observed, he adapted, he flowed. His movements weren't pre-programmed. They were spontaneous responses to the unfolding reality, much like a dancer improvising to a rhythm only they can hear. He learned to read the unseen current of his opponent's intentions, their subtle shifts in balance, the almost imperceptible tensing of their muscles. And then, he would respond not with force, but with a displacement of their energy, guiding their momentum to their own undoing. It was like watching a master fisherman not wrestling the fish, but gently reeling it in, allowing its own struggles to contribute to its capture. This concept of flow extended far beyond the battlefield for Musashi. It permeated his entire existence. When he wrote the Book of Five Rings, he wasn't just penning a treatise on swordsmanship. He was articulating a way of life, a philosophy for navigating the constant resistances of the human condition. Think of his early years, a young man, perhaps impulsive, certainly driven, but undoubtedly encountering setbacks, disappointments, moments when the path ahead seemed blocked. It's in these quiet, often unrecorded moments that the true strength of his mental resilience was forged. He didn't rail against the universe. He observed, he learned, he adjusted. He understood that resistance in its many forms was not an enemy to be vanquished, but a teacher to be understood. Perhaps he would sit by a real river, watching the water navigate around a stubborn boulder. It didn't try to move the boulder. It simply went around, patiently, persistently, eventually smoothing the rough edges of the stone itself. This quiet observation taught him profound lessons about patience, about perseverance, and about the wisdom of adapting rather than confronting head-on. Imagine a moment when a decision felt overwhelming, when the path forward seemed obscured by a thick fog of uncertainty. For Musashi, this wasn't a signal to freeze or to push blindly forward. It was a signal to pause, to breathe, to allow the mental currents to settle, just as muddy water eventually clears when left undisturbed. He understood that clarity often emerges not from frantic effort, but from quiet contemplation, from allowing the unseen currents of insight to guide him. His rule of flow wasn't about being passive or weak. It was about being intelligently dynamic. It was about expending energy wisely, not wastefully. It was about conserving his inner reserves by not fighting battles that didn't need to be fought, by not resisting currents that were simply part of the natural order. Think of how often we resist change in our own lives, how we cling to old habits, how we fight against circumstances that are beyond our control. This resistance, much like fighting a river's current, can be exhausting, depleting our mental and emotional energy. Musashi, however, found freedom in acceptance, not in resignation, but in the understanding that some things simply are, and the wisest course is to adapt to their presence. He understood that the river, by its very nature, is always moving, always changing, always shaping its environment. And so too should we be. Our minds, our spirits, our approaches to life's challenges should possess this fluid adaptability. When you feel yourself tensing, resisting, remember the river. Remember its quiet strength, its unwavering journey, its ability to find a way around, or through, or even by patiently eroding every obstacle in its path. Let your worries about what you cannot change begin to dissolve, like salt in a vast ocean. Allow yourself to consider that perhaps the most powerful way to navigate life's resistances is not to exert more force, but to find a different path, to shift your perspective, to learn to flow with the unseen currents that are always at play. This gentle, persistent movement, this wisdom of water, is the quiet secret to an unbreakable mind, a mind that embraces life's ceaseless flow, and in doing so, finds its own tranquil strength. Let this thought settle deeply within you as you prepare for rest. The current will always be there, but so too is your ability to flow. Chapter 7. The Loom of Many Threads, How Musashi Wove Every Loss into Strength. As the night deepens and the world outside seems to hold its breath, let's consider a warrior who, remarkably, found strength not just in victory, but in every thread of his journey, even the ones that seemed broken or tangled. Imagine Musashi not as someone who always won, but as a master weaver, taking every experience, every challenge, every perceived failure, and weaving it into the strong, intricate fabric of his spirit. He understood that loss wasn't an end but a lesson, a thread that could ultimately make his spirit unbreakable. Have you ever wondered how to transform life's disappointments into a quiet source of resilience? Tonight, we'll gently explore this profound idea, finding comfort in the quiet strength of acceptance and growth. Settle in and allow your thoughts to soften as we envision Musashi, not as an invincible legend, but as a man who faced setbacks, who knew what it felt like to stumble. But unlike many, he didn't allow these experiences to define him negatively. Instead, he saw them as crucial threads, sometimes dark and knotted, but essential to the grand tapestry of his life. He understood that life is not a straight, smooth line. It's a winding path, filled with detours, unexpected turns, and moments where we feel we've lost our way. But it is precisely in navigating these difficult stretches that our true strength is revealed. Like a sturdy rope woven from many individual fibers, some of which might have been frayed at one point, but are now integral to the whole. Consider the metaphor of a loom. Each experience, whether a victory or a perceived failure, is a thread. When a thread breaks, it feels like a loss, a flaw. But Musashi didn't discard the broken threads. He learned to mend them, to reweave them, to incorporate them into the pattern in a new way. Perhaps a loss taught him a crucial lesson about an opponent's weakness, or a flaw in his own technique. Instead of dwelling on the negative emotion of the loss, he meticulously analyzed it, extracted the wisdom, and integrated it into his understanding. This wasn't about ignoring the pain. It was about acknowledging it, learning from it, and then transforming it into fuel for growth. It's like a quiet conversation with a past challenge, asking, "What did you come to teach me?" Musashi understood that true growth rarely happens in comfort. It's often in the crucible of challenge, in the moments of struggle, that our character is forged and our understanding deepens. He didn't shy away from difficult experiences. He embraced them as opportunities for learning. Each time he was defeated or faced a seemingly insurmountable obstacle, he didn't crumble. He became curious. He reflected. He asked himself, "What can this teach me? How can I be better, not just in skill, but in spirit?" This wasn't a fierce, critical self-evaluation, but a gentle, persistent inquiry, born from a desire for continuous improvement. It's like a quiet whisper of resilience, urging you to look for the lesson in every moment. Think about the concept of resilience. It's not about never falling, but about how quickly and effectively we rise again. Musashi's ability to weave every loss into strength was the essence of his resilience. He understood that setbacks are inevitable. It's our response to them that defines us. He didn't allow pride or ego to prevent him from acknowledging his shortcomings. In fact, he found humility in them. This humility allowed him to remain open to learning, to discard old methods that no longer served him, and to adopt new strategies. It's like a river that meets a boulder. It doesn't stop. It flows around it, finding a new path, emerging stronger on the other side. He also cultivated a profound sense of detachment from outcomes. While he obviously strove for victory, he wasn't emotionally crushed by anything less. He understood that some things are simply beyond our control. What he could control was his effort, his preparation, and his attitude. By focusing on what was within his sphere of influence, he freed himself from the paralyzing grip of disappointment. This allowed him to remain clear-headed and adaptable, even in the face of adversity. It's like planting a seed. You can tend to the soil, water it, give it sunlight, but you cannot force it to grow. You trust the process, and you learn from each season. Musashi's journey was long and arduous, filled with solitary wanderings and dangerous encounters. There were likely countless moments of loneliness, of hunger, of exhaustion. These were not just physical trials, but mental ones. Yet, he endured. He found a quiet strength in simply putting one foot in front of the other, in embracing the harsh realities of his chosen path. He understood that endurance itself is a form of strength, a quiet testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It's like the silent growth of a mountain, imperceptible day by day, but ultimately an immovable force. His art of strategy, the Book of Five Rings, is not just about sword fighting. It's about life. And within its pages, one can discern this profound philosophy. Every experience contributes to your understanding. Every challenge sharpens your perception. Every perceived flaw, when examined with gentle curiosity, can become a source of profound strength. He didn't view himself as perfect, but as a perpetual student, constantly refining his understanding, constantly weaving new threads into the ever-evolving fabric of his being. This acceptance of imperfection, this commitment to continuous, gentle self-improvement, was key to his mental, unbreakable nature. So, as you settle into the quiet of the night, let this gentle wisdom settle with you. Your life, like Musashi's, is a grand tapestry. Every experience, every joy, every challenge, every perceived setback. These are all threads. Even the moments that feel like loss can be rewoven, transformed, and ultimately contribute to the strength and beauty of your unique story. Embrace them with quiet acceptance. Learn from them with gentle curiosity, and watch as they strengthen the very fabric of your spirit. May your dreams be filled with the quiet resilience that turns every experience into a deeper understanding of your own profound strength. We've explored how Musashi found strength in stillness and transformed adversity into wisdom. But what about the journey itself, the relentless pursuit of something beyond mere skill? What profound understanding did he gain from the very act of seeking, the constant striving for deeper truth? Let's now turn our gaze to the path itself, and how the endless horizon of learning became his ultimate guide. Chapter 8. The Whisper of the Empty Space. How silence taught Musashi to hear the world. Tonight, as the world outside falls silent and the last of the day's echoes fade, let's imagine a warrior who found his greatest strength not in sound or fury, but in the profound wisdom of empty space. Picture Musashi. Not always in the midst of clashing blades, but often in the quiet wilderness, listening to the wind, observing the stillness between the leaves. He learned that silence wasn't an absence, but a presence, a teacher that whispered truths the busy world could never convey. Have you ever considered what secrets might lie hidden in the quiet spaces of your own life? The moments when nothing seems to be happening? Tonight, we'll gently unfold this intriguing idea, inviting a deeper, more peaceful understanding. Settle in and let your mind soften as we journey to a world where a warrior's perception was honed by the very air around him. Musashi, in his wanderings, was acutely aware of the spaces between things. Not just the physical space between himself and an opponent, but the pause between breaths, the quiet before a storm, the vastness of the empty sky. He understood that in these empty spaces, wisdom often resides, waiting to be heard. The world, he learned, is full of noise. Our own thoughts, the chatter of others, the demands of daily life. But when we intentionally create moments of silence, we create an opportunity to truly listen, not just with our ears, but with our entire being. It's like clearing a cluttered room. Suddenly there's space to breathe, to think, to simply be. Consider a potter shaping clay. The vessel is defined not just by the clay itself, but by the empty space within, the space that gives it purpose. Musashi saw life in a similar way. He focused not just on his actions, but on the spaces between actions. In combat, this meant not rushing, but observing the subtle shifts, the openings, the pauses. It was in these fractions of a second, these moments of empty space, that he found his advantage. He didn't fill every moment with movement. He allowed for stillness, for observation, for intuition to guide him. This stillness, far from being passive, was an active, vigilant awareness. It allowed him to perceive the unsaid, to anticipate the unseen, to react with effortless precision. He also found profound insight in the silence of nature. He spent countless hours in remote mountains, beside flowing rivers, under the vast starry sky. In these solitary moments, stripped of human artifice, he could hear the whispers of the empty space. He learned about patience from the slow growth of trees, about resilience from the enduring rocks, about flow from the ceaseless river. Nature, in its quiet grandeur, became his greatest teacher, showing him the interconnectedness of all things and his own humble place within the grand design. We too can seek out these moments of natural quiet, whether it's gazing out a window at the night sky, listening to the gentle patter of rain, or simply sitting in a quiet garden. In these moments, we allow ourselves to be receptive, to absorb the quiet wisdom that surrounds us. The concept of ma in Japanese aesthetics, which describes the intentional negative space in art, mirrors Musashi's understanding. It's the pause in music that makes the next note resonate, the blank canvas that highlights the brushstrokes, the empty space around a tree that defines its form. Musashi applied this principle to his life and his art. He understood that sometimes the most powerful action is no action at all. Sometimes the most profound communication is silence. He learned when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to wait, guided by the subtle cues offered by the empty space. It's like a quiet conversation where you allow for pauses, letting thoughts settle, giving space for deeper understanding. This understanding of empty space also extended to his mind. He cultivated a mind that was not cluttered with endless thoughts, but one that could become still, open, and receptive. He practiced releasing judgments, expectations, and the need to control every outcome. This mental emptiness allowed him to perceive reality more clearly, without the distortions of his own biases. When his mind was like an empty vessel, it could be filled with fresh insights, with intuitive understanding. This was the foundation of his mental unbreakability. He understood that clinging to ideas, to rigid beliefs, created internal noise that obscured clarity. By emptying his mind, he made space for wisdom. Imagine the quiet confidence of someone who is truly comfortable in silence. They don't feel the need to fill every void with words, every moment with activity. This was Musashi. His presence was often quiet, yet powerful. He knew that true strength wasn't about loudness or grand gestures, but about an inner stillness that radiated calm and authority. This calm, this mastery of the empty space around him and within him, was intimidating to his opponents and inspiring to his students. It's like the deep, peaceful hum of the earth itself, a silent power that holds everything in place. His approach to learning was also shaped by this appreciation for empty space. He didn't just accumulate knowledge, he integrated it, allowed it to settle, and then made space for new insights. He understood that true learning isn't just about input, but about reflection, about allowing ideas to coalesce in the quiet recesses of the mind. He practiced, then reflected. He fought, then contemplated. It was in these periods of quiet assimilation that his understanding deepened. This gentle process allowed his knowledge to transform into true wisdom. So, as the night embraces you in its quiet embrace, let this idea of the whisper of the empty space settle softly within you. Seek out moments of silence in your own life, not as an escape, but as an opportunity to listen, to observe, to simply be. Allow your mind to become like a quiet pond, reflecting the world without judgment. In these moments of stillness, you might just find profound truths, quiet insights, and a deeper connection to the gentle rhythm of life itself. May your dreams tonight be as peaceful and expansive as the vast empty sky, filled with its own unique wisdom. Chapter 9. The Quiet Hearth in the Storm. Musashi's Rule of Solitude Without Loneliness. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the fiercest storm you've ever known. Rain like arrows, wind howling like a wounded beast, the world shaking to its roots. Now, imagine, deep within that chaos, a single, small room. A hearth, glowing with warm, steady embers. The storm rages outside the thin walls, but inside, there's a profound, unshakable quiet. That hearth, my friend, that quiet room in the storm. That's the first secret place Miyamoto Musashi built within himself. It wasn't about hiding from the world, but about finding a sanctuary within the world's relentless fury. That feeling of deep calm, even when everything screams. Wouldn't you like to know how he lit that fire? Let me tell you about solitude that doesn't feel like loneliness. Think not of a monk in silent meditation, though Musashi knew that path. Think instead of a young man, barely more than a boy, walking away from the carnage of his first battlefield at Sekigahara, the air thick with the iron scent of blood and smoke, the groans of the dying, a terrible chorus. He survived, yes, but survival is a raw, ragged thing. In the aftermath, the world felt unbearably loud, unbearably close, unbearably painful. Most would seek company, distraction, the numbing comfort of shared trauma or forgetful revelry. But Musashi, he walked away, not just from the battlefield, but into the deep woods, the lonely mountain paths. This wasn't running away, you see. It was running towards a necessary silence. He carried that battlefield chaos within him. The clang of swords, the screams, the sickening thud of flesh meeting steel. It echoed in his skull, a relentless drumbeat of horror. He needed space, not to escape the memory, but to face it, to hear it clearly without the distracting noise of others, to learn its terrible tune so well he could eventually turn down the volume. Imagine him under a canopy of ancient cedars, the only sound, the rustle of leaves and his own ragged breath. Slowly, slowly calming. He wasn't hiding. He was clearing the ground, building that inner room. This solitude wasn't emptiness. It was preparation. It was the careful stacking of dry kindling within his own spirit. Stone, but something far more resilient. Something that understood that sometimes the flaw, the crack, the very thing we try to hide, holds the secret to holding more light, ready to see strength in a different way. Chapter 10. The Whispering Mountain. Learning Resilience from Musashi's Unyielding Spirit. Take a deep, soft breath and let your mind drift to a place of ancient strength, where time slows and the very air hums with stories untold. Tonight we climb, not a physical peak, but into the spirit of a man who embodied the unwavering resolve of a mountain. Have you ever wondered what it takes to stand firm, unshaken, when winds of change and challenge buffet you from every side? What if resilience isn't just about bouncing back, but about standing unmovable, like the earth itself? Tonight, we delve into the quiet power of the Whispering Mountain, a metaphor for Musashi's unyielding spirit and the profound lessons of resilience he carried within him. Imagine him, not as a fleeting figure, but as an enduring force, much like a mountain that has stood for centuries, witnessing countless seasons, unperturbed by the passage of time or the ferocity of storms. Musashi cultivated an inner strength so deep, so rooted, that it mirrored the steadfastness of the earth itself. He understood that true resilience wasn't about avoiding the blows of life, but about absorbing them, integrating them, and remaining fundamentally intact. His journey was a testament to the idea that strength isn't always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it's a quiet, unwavering presence, a profound inner stillness that cannot be disturbed. He learned this through consistent self-reflection, through facing his own limitations, and through embracing discomfort as a teacher. Just as a mountain's face is carved by wind and rain, so too was Musashi's character shaped by the relentless pressures of his existence. Yet, through it all, he remained centered, his core unwavering. He practiced patience, a deep, abiding patience that felt as ancient as the rocks themselves. He understood that true mastery, whether of a skill or of oneself, was not achieved overnight. It required countless hours of dedicated effort, of quiet repetition, of learning from every stumble and every small victory. He didn't rush his growth. He allowed it to unfold naturally, like a seed slowly pushing through the soil toward the sun. This patience allowed him to weather periods of stagnation or frustration, knowing that progress, though sometimes imperceptible, was always happening beneath the surface. He cultivated an extraordinary sense of focus, a single-minded dedication to his path. Like a mountain standing firm, his attention was not easily swayed by distractions or fleeting desires. He committed himself entirely to understanding the way, to perfecting his craft, and to seeking profound truths. This unwavering focus allowed him to delve deeply into whatever he pursued, extracting insights that others might miss in their hurried approach. He understood that true knowledge and mastery came from sustained, intense concentration, like the slow, steady erosion that carves valleys into solid rock. He embraced the concept of emptiness, not as a void, but as a spaciousness, a receptive quality of mind that allowed him to be fully present and responsive to his environment. Like the vast, empty sky above a mountain, his mind was open, clear, and unburdened by preconceived notions or attachments. This emptiness was his strength, allowing him to perceive situations without bias, to adapt effortlessly, and to act with spontaneous grace. It was a profound release from the mental clutter that often obscures our true potential. He learned to listen deeply, not just with his ears, but with his entire being. He listened to the subtle whispers of his intuition, to the silent language of nature, to the unspoken cues in his interactions. Like the mountain that quietly observes the changing world around it, he absorbed information without judgment, allowing wisdom to emerge from his observations. This deep listening allowed him to anticipate, to understand, and to connect with the world on a profound level, beyond mere words. He was attuned to the underlying currents of life, the hidden forces that shape events. He practiced letting go, shedding the unnecessary, releasing attachments to outcomes, to possessions, to reputation. Like a mountain that sheds rocks and debris in a landslide, he continually purged what no longer served his growth. This act of release wasn't a loss. It was a liberation, freeing him from the burdens that weighed down others. He understood that true freedom came from non-attachment, from holding things lightly, and from trusting in the natural flow of existence. This detachment allowed him to remain light, adaptable, and unburdened by the accumulation of worries. He found profound strength in solitude, not loneliness, but a deliberate choice to retreat and replenish his spirit. Like a mountain standing alone, connected to the vastness of the sky, he used these periods of isolation to deepen his self-awareness, to reflect, and to commune with the quiet wisdom within. In these solitary moments, he was able to shed the demands of the external world and reconnect with his authentic self, finding clarity and renewed purpose. This solitude was a wellspring of his resilience, allowing him to return to the world with a refreshed and unwavering spirit. He understood the power of the present moment, anchoring himself firmly in now. Like the mountain that simply is, without dwelling on its past or fearing its future, Musashi lived fully in each unfolding moment. He poured his entire attention into the task at hand, whether it was a simple act of daily life or a momentous challenge. This radical presence allowed him to act with optimal efficiency and to experience life with profound richness, unburdened by the distractions of regret or anxiety. He cultivated a deep sense of humility, recognizing that he was always a student, always learning, always growing. Like a mountain that appears unchanging, but is constantly being shaped by the subtle forces of nature, he understood that true mastery was a continuous process of refinement. He never assumed he had all the answers, always remaining open to new insights, new perspectives, and new lessons. This humility protected him from arrogance and allowed him to continuously expand his understanding. His resilience wasn't about being unfeeling. It was about an unshakable inner core that allowed him to feel deeply, to experience life fully, and yet remain firm in his purpose. He was like a mountain that feels the rain, the sun, the wind, but remains steadfast in its essence. His spirit was unyielding, not rigid, but deeply rooted, allowing him to bend without breaking, to adapt without losing his identity. As you close your eyes and drift into slumber, imagine yourself as a mountain, deeply rooted, unyielding, yet open to the sky. Feel the strength of the earth beneath you, and let your spirit be as calm and resolute as its ancient peaks. May you find your own unshakable resilience as you rest deeply. Now, having touched upon the mountain's wisdom, let's cast our gaze further to the boundless horizon. Musashi's journey wasn't just about conquering foes. It was a perpetual quest for meaning, an endless exploration of life itself. What if every step we take, every breath we draw, holds a deeper purpose, waiting to be discovered, just beyond what we can currently see? Chapter 11. Whispers from the Empty Mind. finding clarity in the stillness of combat. Imagine a place within you, a quiet sanctuary, where all the noise of the world, all the anxieties and doubts, simply fade away. Tonight, we'll explore that profound stillness, not in a calm garden, but in the most unlikely of places, the heart of intense conflict. It's a paradox, isn't it? That true clarity, true presence, can emerge when everything around you screams for attention. As you lie here, let your mind gently release its hold on the day's chatter and open itself to the possibility that within silence, even a bustling one, lies immense wisdom. Musashi often spoke of the empty mind, not as a void, but as a state of boundless potential, a canvas unblemished by preconceived notions or emotional clutter. This wasn't merely a philosophical concept for him. It was a profound, practical strategy, especially when faced with the life or death intensity of a duel. Imagine him standing opposite an opponent, the air thick with tension, the anticipation almost unbearable. For most, this moment would be filled with a cacophony of thoughts: fear, strategy, past mistakes, future outcomes. But for Musashi, this was precisely when his mind became most still, most empty, most receptive. He wasn't thinking about his next move. He was simply being. He wasn't reacting from a place of learned responses. He was responding from a deep, intuitive core, like a mirror, reflecting what stands before it without judgment or alteration. Think of a clear mountain lake on a windless day. Its surface reflects the sky, the trees, the clouds, with perfect clarity. If a stone is thrown in, ripples disrupt the image, but soon the surface becomes calm again, ready to reflect anew. This was Musashi's mind in combat. He allowed himself to see, truly see, his opponent without the interference of his own ego or fear. He observed their posture, their breathing, the subtle flick of an eye, the almost invisible tension in their grip. And these observations didn't trigger a complex mental process, but rather an immediate, effortless response. The empty mind meant shedding the burden of expectation, both for himself and for his opponent. It meant letting go of the need to win, paradoxically, making victory more accessible. It meant embracing the moment fully, without clinging to the past or projecting into the future. For us, in our modern lives, though we may not face swordsmen, we often encounter situations that demand clarity under pressure, a difficult conversation, a challenging project, an unexpected setback. In these moments, our minds can become cluttered, filled with noise, making it hard to think straight. We might replay past failures or worry about future consequences. And in doing so, we lose the precious ability to simply be in the present, to observe clearly, and to respond effectively. Musashi, through rigorous practice and profound self-awareness, cultivated this inner stillness. It wasn't about suppressing thoughts, but about letting them pass through without attachment, like clouds drifting across the sky. He understood that true insight doesn't come from forcing solutions, but from creating the space for them to emerge naturally. Imagine him sitting in quiet contemplation before a duel, perhaps in the solitude of a temple or beneath a tree. He wasn't rehearsing moves in his mind. He was emptying it. He was releasing the anxieties, the fears, the ego that might demand a certain outcome. He was creating a vast, open space for intuition to flourish. And when the moment of truth arrived, that empty space became his greatest ally. It allowed him to perceive patterns invisible to a cluttered mind, to anticipate movements before they fully materialized, and to respond with a fluidity that seemed almost supernatural. This stillness wasn't passive. It was profoundly active. It was a heightened state of awareness, where every sense was alive, yet the mental chatter was hushed. It's like listening to the gentle hum of existence, rather than the loud demands of our own inner voice. This concept of the empty mind is truly a gift, a reminder that peace and clarity aren't found by adding more to our lives, but by gently releasing what doesn't serve us. It's about finding that calm center, even when the world around us is in motion, and recognizing that within that stillness, immense wisdom resides. As you lie here, let your mind become like that clear lake, reflecting only what is, unburdened by the echoes of yesterday or the shadows of tomorrow. Allow the whispers from your own empty mind to guide you gently into a deep and peaceful rest. We've journeyed through the calm flow of a river and found clarity in the stillness of an empty mind. Now, let's slow our pace even further, to the quiet, almost imperceptible drop of a single stone. For within such a simple act lies a profound lesson about time, patience, and the powerful ripple effects of consistent effort, a truth Musashi held dear.